Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. All the characters in the story who enter into intimate relationships are over 18 years old. I felt that something was bothering Paula as soon as she crossed the threshold. This is what you acquire after almost 20 years of marriage. Is something wrong, Paula? I asked, watching her busy cooking dinner. No, nothing at all, she replied, perhaps too hastily. Another thing I learned during my time with Paula was that she can't be forced to open something unless she wants to. Molesting her would be a waste of time at best, or lead to a quarrel at worst. I set the table and kept my mouth shut. I have to go back to work for a while tomorrow night around 7, Bill, Paula said. I need to meet with some parents to discuss the lack of progress their children are making. No problem, I replied, remembering my conversation with Tim Brown that day. Tim was the head technician at the high school where Paula taught. He was in my body shop getting an estimate for repairing a dent in his wing from an all-too-ordinary interaction with a deer. He explained how ridiculous he thought it would be to evacuate the entire school tomorrow night, while some special chemical protection guys removed about 4 inches of asbestos insulation found on the heating pipe in the bus garage. The garage was almost 100 yards from the school building, but the people in power did not want any problems to arise due to the removal of dangerous material. Therefore, it was decided to evacuate the school, including the night watch staff. And now Paula is telling me that she has an appointment at school this evening? It didn't make any sense. Paula never lied about anything, especially about such trifles. And then it hit me. This may not be trivial at all. Where is she really going and why? Why did she feel the need to lie? I thought about it during dinner and much later. In the end, I made a decision and focused all my attention on spending the rest of the evening with my wife and our 2 teenage daughters. The next day, I invited my new employee Steve Milko to my office and explained what I wanted from him. Just follow Paula and see where she goes and who she meets, Steve. She hasn't met you yet, so she has no reason to suspect you. I know it's not part of your job responsibilities, but it would be a favor to me, and I'll pay you overtime for the time you actually spend on it, I added. That settles it, boss. Steve chuckled. I can easily recognize your wife from this photo of her and your children. I'll keep an eye on her and give you a full report tomorrow morning. I didn't like what I was doing, but I felt like I had no choice. Paula lied to me. I should have known why. In all the years I've spent with her, I've never suspected her of telling a lie. Now those years of trust have been shattered. Well, boss, I did a pretty good job last night, but you're not going to like what I've learned, Steve began, sitting down in the chair in front of my desk. Your wife met some slippery guy at the Dewdrop Hotel. They sat down at a table in the far corner. We bought a couple of beers and sat down at the next one. And who the hell are we, Steve? I demanded an answer. I thought you understood that this is a delicate matter and that I don't want the whole city to know about it. Damn it, boss. How long have you been married? I can't just get up and walk out the door at any time of the day or night, whenever I want, without telling my wife where I'm going and what I'm doing. If I try to lie to her, she'll figure it out, and then my ass will be on fire. As soon as Marcy heard my task, she couldn't be left alone. It worked well because she hears better than I do, and she's a hell of a lot smarter than me, even though I'd never admit it to her, Steve admitted. Just keep talking, Steve, I said shortly. When I sat down, I noticed that the guy had old magazines on the table. I couldn't tell you what kind of magazines they were, but I know what was in them, Steve continued. This jerk was blackmailing your wife, boss. He told her that he would show the photos in the magazine to you and your children and would even send some to your wife's director if she did not cooperate. How much money did he ask her for? What kind of photos were they? How much time did he give her? I asked quickly. What did Paula tell him? Now, boss. Remember, I'm just reporting. Don't kill the messenger. Okay? He told her that he wanted her to become his mistress and gave her until Monday to make a decision. Your wife begged him to accept the money, but he just laughed at the offer. With all due respect, boss, he told her that he wanted her whenever he was in that mood. There were no options. I had to hold Marcy down so she wouldn't get up and smash a beer bottle on his coconut. She was so hot. I thought about what Steve had told me. Blackmail was easily thwarted. All that was required was the truth. What truth could be so terrible that Paula would even think about such a despicable offer? Who is this poor bastard? I suppose you didn't catch this guy's name? I asked hopefully. Boss, we found out his name. This is Tom. That's what your wife called him, Steve replied. Well, shit. That rules out Dick and Harry, but there are a lot of shitty men named Tom in the neighborhood, I grumbled. Can you tell me what he looked like? A smile slowly stretched across Steve's face when he heard my question. I told you, Marcy's a lot smarter than me, boss. Before they broke off their little meeting, Marcy came up with a brilliant idea. I get up so she can take a picture of me on her cell phone. The only thing she missed was my pretty face and took a picture of an asshole blackmailing your wife. I have it here, Steve grinned, took his phone out of his pocket, pressed a couple of buttons, and handed it to me. Here comes the dude. The photo wasn't the best, but I recognized the man right away. It was Thomas Mann, a teacher since 2000, who had recently been appointed deputy principal of the high school where Paula worked. He almost got the post because Paula complained about what she considered inappropriate behavior between Mann and a freshman last year. Then he told Paula in private that she would regret her action. Obviously, he was trying to fulfill his promise. There were a lot of questions. What was he blackmailing Paula with? Why old magazines? How will Paula react to this threat? Will she come to me for help? Can she give in to blackmail? I knew the answer to the last question. Over my dead body. It was Thursday morning. I had a few days to think about the situation and try to find a good solution. If anything, I'm going to visit this jerk on Monday and end his dreams of sleeping with my wife or any other woman. It just seemed to me that risking being arrested was a bad idea. Then everything he uses to blackmail Paula will become public knowledge. How can you stop a blackmailer? Paula was quiet and preoccupied that evening. Even our daughters noticed this and asked her if anything had happened. Paula made some lame excuse about thinking about new ideas for the literature course she was reading. Somehow, the girls accepted it. That night, lying in bed, Paula was all over me. She gave me everything a man can ask of a wife, and she would have continued if I had been able. Then she put her head on my shoulder and, clinging tightly to me, confessed her endless love. What was happening made her fear that she might lose me. I saw that very clearly. The next day, as soon as I got home, there was a knock on the front door. My eldest daughter, Chris, opened the door and called me. It turned out to be a courier with a package for me and another for my daughters, Lisa. By the time I signed, Chris had already opened the package and was rummaging through its contents. These are old magazine photos of naked women, and one of them is Mom. Chris screamed. Let me see. Lisa insisted, snatching the pages from her sister's hands. Wow, this is Mom, and she's showing everything. Look how young she is. She was beautiful. Chris gasped, looking over her sister's shoulder. Dad, when did Mom take these pictures? Why didn't she ever show them to us? Why did we receive them in some kind of postal package? Your mother will be back soon. You have to ask her these questions. And now let's sit down, calmly look at all this and discuss what we think about all this, I suggested. 20 minutes later, Paula sighed as she walked through the front door. The weight of the world seemed to be on her shoulders. Then she noticed the three of us sitting on the couch with photos spread out on the coffee table. Oh no, that was all she could say when the realization of what we were looking at hit her. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Mom, come over here and look at these photos that we recently received, Chris insisted. You've never told us about this, and we're all very upset. I'm so sorry, Chris. These terrible photos were a huge mistake that I made many years ago. You shouldn't have seen them, Paula exclaimed, very upset. Mom, you're so beautiful. We are upset that you never told us about them and never showed them to us. We want to make copies and hang them on the wall. I can't wait to show my friends how hot my mom was, Chris exclaimed. Yes, Mom. Dad says that in real life you were even more beautiful than in these photos. Why didn't you tell us about them, Mom? You're so cool, Lisa giggled, running up to her mother and hugging her. Paula was clearly stunned for the second time in the last few minutes. Her tears stopped flowing when her daughters showered her with love and compliments. She turned her attention to me. Honey, you're still beautiful, I told her, getting up and walking over to her. In fact, you look even better today than you did many years ago, and that says a lot. I hugged her and hugged her to me. She buried her face in my chest and sobbed a little, and then looked at me. Don't you hate me, Bill? Paula whispered. Do you still love me? More than ever, honey. I laughed and kissed her hard. Now that we're done with all this nonsense, Mom, come over here and tell us all about these photos, Chris insisted. We are dying to hear the story behind these magazine photos. Were you a model or something? My father died when I was a freshman. Do you remember I told you about this, girls? I've already told you that for the first 3 years of college, I earned my own living. My mother didn't have much money left. Yes, I posed for photographers who sent photos to these magazines, and for those calendars that men like to look at. They weren't exactly respectable family magazines. But they weren't really bad either, Paula quickly added. By posing and working as a waitress on weekends, I have largely paid for my college. At the end of my junior year, an uncle I had never met died and left me over $10,000. I was able to stop posing. I worked as a waitress and graduated from college next year, Paula concluded. Why didn't you ever tell us about this? Why didn't you show us the pictures, Mom? Chris asked. You look amazing. I hope in a couple of years I will have the same figure as you. I think it's obvious, Chris. I'm not proud of what I've done. I have a feeling that I betrayed you, children, as well as your father, although at that time I did not know him, and you too, of course, were not born yet, Paula explained. I was determined to get a degree and a decent job, no matter what it cost me. It turns out that I jeopardized my future by being so determined. I lived in fear that your father would one day find out the truth and leave me. I wouldn't blame him if he did. You don't seem to know much about Dad, Lisa laughed. He couldn't tear himself away from these photos and told us how incredible you are. He said we should be proud to have such a beautiful and smart mom. Did he say that? Paula was amazed. All these years I've been worried about him finding out, and it turns out that it turns him on? Mom, both girls screamed in unison. We're just little girls, Mom, Chris laughed. Save this stuff for the bedroom, please. Sorry, girls. Bill, will you help me unzip my dress? Paula asked, taking my hand and heading into the bedroom. Don't forget about our dinner. Lovebirds, Chris shouted, clearly not fooled by the zipper excuse. The next day was Saturday. I called Steve's wife, Marcy, and asked if she would accompany me to a meeting with the principal, Mrs. Gwen Wilder. When I explained exactly what I meant, she jumped at the opportunity. Then I called Miss Wilder at home and made an appointment for the afternoon, explaining that it was extremely important. The three of us were sitting at a large table in Wilder's office. I took out the bag and put it on the table. Mrs. Wilder, I want you to look at these photos and then listen to a little drama that Marcy overheard. I began. When you print them out, you will see that these are old magazine photos of my wife Paula. And you'll probably notice that she's posing nude. And that she has a damn beautiful figure, Marcy exclaimed, flipping through the stack. I would really like to meet your wife. She's just amazing. It seems strange to me that you brought this to my attention, Bill. Paula had a very good reputation at our school. Her work was excellent, and she received nothing but encouragement. Why risk showing me these racy photos at all? Gwen Wilder asked. Because they exist, Mrs. Wilder. That means they could be used against her at some point in the future, and I'm afraid that could be the very near future, I added. Paula helped pay for college by posing for these magazines. She's not particularly proud of them. They are what they are. You can decide if they are violating her contract in any way. She wants to continue working at your school, but she will neither apologize nor beg to leave her. Moreover, she won't be blackmailed by some cowardly jerk, I said decisively. Now Marcy will tell you what she overheard and is ready to testify under oath. It was Monday morning, and Paula was clearly excited. This asshole is waiting for my answer today, Bill. I told you about the deadline. I don't understand why he sent the photos to you and the girls ahead of time, Paula said thoughtfully. Maybe he thinks that my fear of being fired will be enough to force me to comply with his demands. That's probably the way it is, Paula, I agreed. However, he would have known that you would ask me who sent these photos, and I will tell you. This seems to put him at some risk and reduce the likelihood that I will agree to his proposal, she reasoned. Who knows what that crazy bastard thinks, Paula? I asked. Don't try to understand a sick mind. You're probably right, but it seems strange to me, Paula continued. I wonder if I'll find a job after today? Well, there's only one way to find out. I love you, Bill. Thank you for your understanding and forgiveness. I hugged Paula tightly to me, kissed her, and opened the door for her. Paula worked with several students on the script of a school play that she directed every year. Classes were over for the day, and the school was almost empty. I was standing backstage and just watching. About 15 minutes into the rehearsal, Mr. Thomas Mann burst through the door, swearing like a madman. His anger was directed at the floor. "Oh, you pathetic one. I got fired because of you. I'm smart enough to beat some damn respect into you. You're just a fucking fool," he shouted, approaching the field with a clenched fist. Unfortunately for him, I was ready for something like this and stood in front of Paula before he could reach her. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that the students were running away in horror. It worked great for my purposes. Man's surprise was complete. I kept finishing the crazy bastard right on the floor. Then Mrs. Wilder and the school security jumped on stage and stopped abruptly, looking first at Man's sprawled body and then at me. She just nodded. She then told her security guard to call 911 and call the police and an ambulance. After Mann was wheeled out on a gurney, swearing like an old sailor, Paula took me aside. "Don't treat me like an idiot, Bill," she began. "Too many things don't add up in this mess. You seem to know what to expect before it happened, and nothing surprised you. You were here because you thought Tom might come after me. When he met with me that evening to show me the photos and try to blackmail me, he only had 2 magazines with 4 photos. He didn't know about the other photos of me that were in that newsletter. You and the girls have received all the magazines and calendars that I have ever published in. Tom didn't have them all. I'm quite sure of that. The headmistress just told me that the testimony of a certain woman named Marcy Milko will be proof that Tom tried to blackmail me for making love. The only Milko I've ever heard of is some guy you recently hired, but whom I've never met. The only time Tom and I met about this was at the Dewdrop. Now I remember the strange actor couple in the next booth that night. What are you hiding from me, Bill?" Paula demanded. I hoped Paula would never connect all the dots. She was too smart to be fooled. I had no choice but to throw myself on her mercy. "Paula, you're not the only one who's been living with a secret all these years. Please listen and try to understand. I had just graduated from a trade college and was working at my first job. As was customary back then, guys always hung women's photos on the walls in the store. They glued them to their toolboxes and almost everything else they could fit on. You were one of those pin-up models. I couldn't stop looking at you. I started buying all these magazines, looking for more photos of you and reading everything I could about you. In one of them, I found out that you study at a large public college in the East. As sad as it sounds, I started going to the state capitol on weekends, hoping that your college was there and that I would see you in person. There was no real reason to even think that it was the college you went to, or even that you went to college at all, I confessed. I had such thoughts that I would find you, and in an hour you would be naked in my arms. Incredibly, I found you after a football match. Remember? It was your senior year, and you stopped being a model, or whatever you call it. Do you remember that it took me 2 whole years to finally undress you and feel you in my arms? I was head over heels in love with you long before that. I knew the school was closed that night when you said you had to go back there, but you were actually meeting with Mann. My new boyfriend at work was watching you, and luckily he took his wife Marcy with him. They heard everything and told me. I sent these photos to the girls and myself so that you would stop being afraid and tell Mann to go to hell. These photos were from my personal stash. On Saturday, I took Marcy to the manager and told her the whole story. I knew that if Mann tried to show her these photos, it would be the last proof that he was a blackmailer and she would fire him. I was afraid that he might try to take it out on you later, so I stayed close to keep an eye on you, I explained. Why didn't you ever tell me that you knew about these photos when we met, or ever afterwards, Bill? Paula asked. I was afraid you'd think I was a pervert or a stalker, and I guess technically I was. As soon as I found you and realized that no matter how beautiful your body was, your soul was even better, and I couldn't risk losing you. I was afraid that one day you'd find out that I'd been looking for you at Penn State College for 8 months, and you'd think I was crazy, I confessed. I just love you very much, Paula. Didn't you risk showing these pictures to the girls, Bill? You knew you could make them hate me, right? Paula asked. No, it never occurred to me. I made sure I'd be there when they looked at them. I knew they would never hate you. I also assumed that they would study my reaction to these photos and use this as a guide. Your girls will never be able to hate you, and neither I nor anyone else can do it. Their reaction was the way you saw it. They have a hot mother, and I have a great wife. I'd love to hear you tell the girls the rest of the story tonight, Bill, Paula said matter-of-factly. They know my secret, and now you're going to tell them yours so you don't have to live in fear anymore. They will understand that if I hadn't posed for these photos, we would never have met. I just hope you don't scare them off.